Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Rachel Rubel. The political crisis in Venezuela is threatening to tear apart a country blessed with one of the world's largest oil reserves. The standoff between two leaders, both claiming to be the country's rightful ruler, has forced much of the world to choose sides. Caught in the middle of this standoff is Turkey and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's close relationship with his Venezuelan counterpart, Nicolas Maduro. Nearly half a world away, what's led to this unlikely friendship? And will it withstand this current crisis? Eddie's Tianchen explains.
Venezuela is in turmoil with a face-off between President Nicolas Maduro and Juan Guido, opposition leader and the head of the National Assembly. Both are claiming to be the president. Maduro was sworn in 2 weeks ago following last year's disputed elections and has the support of the military, China, Russia and Turkey. The US and a majority of Central and South American countries are backing Guaido. With close political and economic ties, Turkey has thrown its weight behind Nicolas Maduro. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has made his support clear for the embattled leader who he called a brother.
Demokrasi noktasında antidemokratik girişimlere asla prim verme dedim. Dik dur dedim.
Maduro spoke to CNN Turk in Caracas and said the phone call of support from Erdogan made to him was no surprise, as they have been friends since an attempted coup in Turkey back in July 2016.
But when I heard about the coup attempt and saw the photos of the people on the streets defending their homeland, I immediately called on my foreign minister to condemn this attack. We've been friends with Erdogan since that day. I can say that he is a good friend. I love Turkish people.
Erdogan made a trip to Venezuela in December to meet with Maduro and pledged an investment of $5 billion by Turkish businessmen into the country's battered economy. Maduro has traveled to Turkey 4 times in 2 years, signed trade and cooperation deals, and attended Erdogan's inauguration. But according to Turkish officials, support for Maduro goes beyond the personal bond shared between the two presidents. For Turkey, it is about upholding a country's sovereignty and avoiding the bloodshed that often follows the removal of an elected leader.
There is an elected president, and on the other hand, the head of Congress declares himself de facto president. Some countries recognize this, and it may cause chaos.
Meanwhile, Maduro has remained defiant, accusing the Trump administration of leading a coup against him. While addressing a military exercise, he announced Venezuela's civilian armed militia would be expanded to 2 million by mid-April.
Over the last week, we've seen a number of protests, both by Guaido and Maduro supporters across the country. Guaido aims to make a point, especially to Venezuela's military, that he does have a major support group. While Maduro still enjoys the backing of the military leadership, he's under immense international pressure. The most recent sanctions by the US could have a crippling effect on the nation's economy, and many are concerned that the lack of a political solution could lead to violence on the ground. It is Tianshan, Caracas, Straight Talk.
And joining me now, Michael Derham, who is a senior lecturer specializing on Latin America at Northumbria University in the UK, and Seda Aybar, who heads the economic department at Istanbul Aydın University. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Mr. Aybar, I'll start with you. The Turkish president was one of the first leaders to congratulate Nicolas Maduro when he won the presidency and to voice support for him during this current political crisis. Why is Erdogan so confident in Maduro's legitimacy? And talk to us, if you can, a little bit about the relationship between Erdogan and Maduro itself.
Probably it is coming from the fact that Maduro is the legitimate leader of Venezuela. And Erdogan, Turkish president, has been complaining about the similar issues that he's been subjected to, particularly from the Western power centers, Washington, D.C., and sometimes from the EU, that he perceives that undermines his own authority. which is now directed at Maduro. So there is a kind of sympathy that is developing on Erdogan's part for Maduro. Maduro is, he's a legitimate leader. He's an elected leader in Venezuela. Despite all the economic difficulties that the country is facing, he's still the legitimate leader. And in a way that international order is, arranging what is to become out of Venezuela, is pushing Erdogan or developing for Maduro a sympathy towards Venezuelan people and Maduro himself. So that's international order and the arrangements around it and the way in which the United States wants to exercise its power over these states.
I want to get to my other guest here real quickly, Mr. Durham. What do we know about Juan Guido? We don't really know much about him because he really only came on the international stage about 2 weeks ago when he declared himself interim president. We know he's a young guy, 35 years old, but who is he?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. He isn't very well known. He is 35. He's been schooled in the United States. He has brown skin, and I think that's important. And I also think he's disposable to the United States. I think he's, to some degree, been forced into pronouncing himself president against the democratically elected president, as we've already heard. And so he's got himself involved with the United States, but they're not very nice people to get involved with. I think they're pressuring him. And as I say, I think he's ultimately disposable. They will look round for somebody in the medium term who's more acceptable to them, I think, really. I think he's a patsy, as they say in the United States.
Mr. Ibar, you talked about how Turkey has dealt with some of the similar issues that Venezuela is dealing with. Maduro has consistently accused the U.S. of deliberately sabotaging his country's economy. Is there proof of that? And does Turkey agree? Because Turkey made those same allegations last year when the Turkish lira plummeted.
Absolutely. I mean, these are not allegations, but with regards to what's happening in Venezuela, it's not a secret that the United States has been putting forward policies that undermines country's stability for a very, very long time, even before Maduro. When Chavez was the president, he was an elected president, and there has been coup attempts against Chavez. There has been assassination attempts against Chavez, and the originating dynamics of those attempts are not generated from within Venezuela, but it came from outside. Now, when we look at the affairs in the world and the way in which those affairs are organized, in President Erdogan's words, he constantly criticizes these affairs that only 5 superpowers at the United Nations Security Council, they decide on the future of the world. And he constantly says the world is bigger than 5. That is to say, when we consider troubles that the world is going through during this era, when we look at those things, these are inevitably bringing out those complaints and the history of that undermining dynamics is, of course, raising some eyebrows, not only in Ankara, but also in Russia, in China, and many other places around the world.
Okay. How much popularity does Guaido really enjoy in Venezuela and internationally? You called him a patsy to the United States and disposable. I mean, do people really think that he will be able to run Venezuela better?
Well, he hasn't got any policies to run Venezuela. The only policy which unites the opposition is to get rid of Maduro and to get control of the oil industry, to get control of the treasury. That's it. And so we haven't heard any strategies, any programs. The United States will come in. They've promised £20 million, I think, for emergency food aid. They want to call Venezuela a humanitarian crisis, which means then that other countries are allowed to go in to resolve that humanitarian crisis, and that's what Venezuela doesn't want. How popular is he? Well, he's popular with the people who want to change and who have forgotten that today's opposition have been in power before, between 1958 and 1998. Same social class, some of the same political parties. And honestly, when I first went to Venezuela in 1997, I looked out of the window at Caracas airport. I was horrified by the poverty I saw. And I'd lived in Peru for a year. I'd never seen anything like that. And this was an oil state with arguably the biggest reserves in the world. It should not be like that, but that's where it was taken to by today's opposition. And so you also have to look forward. The Venezuelan people know what's going to happen when the opposition takes over. The same thing happened during the short coup in 2002. It's a very bloody coup, and it only lasted 3 days. So you have to look back, you have to look forward to understand what's happening today. People might not like Maduro, certainly he's no Chavez, but they also know what they're going to expect with the opposition.
Yeah, it's really a terrible situation. Is Erdogan's support for Maduro just another way for Turkey to show that it's pursuing an independent foreign policy from the United States?
That is part of it, but there's also Turkey's stand vis-a-vis Venezuelan crisis is to take side on the despised and impoverished, the bullied nation. Now, Turkey doesn't accept to be bullied. Turkey doesn't accept other nations being bullied. But what is going on in Venezuela today is a multi-layered crisis. At one level, this crisis is relating to economic affairs and how the economy is run. And as far as that's concerned, it's a disaster in Venezuela. But also, in the same time, that multi-layered crisis relates to political side of it. And when it comes to politics, then how this is going to unbundle and unfold it for the future of Venezuela, whether Venezuelan indigenous people are going to have a say on it, or is it the superpowers, the more powerful, going to push Venezuela into a political situation? At that stage, at that echelon, Turkey is not going to accept that kind of bullying, and not only for Venezuela, but for other parts of the world as well.
A very difficult situation for sure. Michael Derham and Sada Ivar, thank you for joining us today. The Kurdish regions of northern Iraq have enjoyed relative stability compared with more violent parts of the country. But a deadly clash on January 26 in the city of Duhok broke that uneasy calm. And the usual suspects weren't involved, not Iraq's security forces, the U.S. or Daesh. Instead, a group of protesters stormed a Turkish military base, which left more than a dozen injured and 2 people dead. Iraqi Kurdish officials and the Turkish government have pointed blame at one group, the PKK. John Hassasu has the details.
It was supposed to be a peaceful demonstration that ended in chaos. The incident took place in Duhok after 2 Iraqi civilians were reportedly killed in a Turkish airstrike that targeted PKK terrorists in the area. Demonstrators burned vehicles and tents just outside the Turkish garrisons. Iraq's Kurdish region's prime minister was quick to point the blame at the PKK presence in Iraq.
Going to the Turkish base and attacking it is not a solution. People need to come and talk to us. The truth is, if the PKK wasn't there, there will be no airstrike. It's clear that the cause of the events here is the PKK. We have warned people not to enter certain areas before, but our citizens have violated the order.
Turkey's presence in northern Iraq stretches back decades, as it fought the PKK terror group holed up in the mountains. What started as small cross-border raids into northern Iraq in the 1980s eventually morphed into a larger presence. By 1991, hoping to fill the security vacuum left by the First Gulf War, Turkey established its first base in Iraq to fight the growing threat posed by the PKK. One that continues to this day. We went to Shaladiza along the border, where daily life seemed to be returning back to normal. most people here don't see Turkey as the enemy.
This is not a new problem. It has been more than 20 years and we are in the middle of the fight between Turkey and the PKK. We gave a lot of victims. No one here supports the attack on the Turkish base, but it was the last straw.
The Turkish military isn't the only one fighting the PKK. Peshmerga fighters loyal to the Iraqi Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani sided with the Turks in many operations. Here in the town of Shaladiza, 96 of his men lost their lives. Peshmerga commander Ibrahim Khalil was one of them. He died in an ambush by the PKK. His political activist son says the terror group is harming Kurds.
They are causing unrest in our society. They intervened in Syria and destroyed the Kurds. It is because their policy is not just and wise. They may look like they are fighting for Kurds, but they are serving foreign powers hostile to us, and they are creating problems for our region.
It is estimated that there are nearly 3,000 Turkish troops in northern Iraq, where they are on the front lines against groups like the PKK and Daesh. After absorbing what happened this past weekend, new security measures are being taken by the Kurdish authorities around Turkish bases in Iraq, a sign that the alliance with Ankara is still in full force. Can Hasasu, Straight Talk.
And joining me now in the studio are Sammy Hamdi, who is the editor-in-chief of the International Interest magazine, and Mehmet Oğuztu, who is a former Turkish diplomat who has worked in the Kurdish regions of northern Iraq. Thank you both for joining me today. Sammy, I want to start with you. Protesters storming a Turkish base in Iraq, like they did last week, is a rare event. But can you explain how local Kurds feel about Turkey's presence and their fight against the PKK terror group?
I think it's a complicated dynamic. I think first and foremost, we have to remember that there are three major forces in Iraq today, which are the Americans, the Iranians, who have over 62 militias there, and we have the Turks. Right now, there is a law that is trying to be pushed past in Iraq to kick out all foreign forces. The target, of course, is the Iranian and US forces. However, the Iraqi government is struggling to tell the US to leave and struggling to tell the Iranians to leave. So it thinks Turkey is the easy target. If we're talking about the Kurdish region in particular, I think the Kurds have some sympathy towards Turkey's cause that Turkey is trying to protect its domestic security. Turkey is trying to fend off an organization that is set on plunging Turkey into a civil war and trying to secede from Turkey and create a state, and is doing so by means that are quite frankly not acceptable, killing Turkish citizens, Turkish soldiers, Turkish civilians, and the like. I think with regards to the storming, this is taking place after Donald Trump announced he's withdrawing from Syria. The PKK are panicking because now they realize, and the YPG, because they have no powerful ally to back them after the US leave. Nobody is giving them assurances that they will be looked after. Turkey is threatening to invade those areas, to go in after the PKK, to go in after the YPG in order to secure its domestic security. There's a lot of sympathy towards it, towards what Turkey is doing in the Kurdistan. And also Masoud Barzani, the head of the KRG region, enjoys a very warm relationship with Turkey. Turkey has done much in that region in terms of development, in terms of trying to promote ties and the like.
Okay, I want to interrupt real quick because I want to get to my other guest, Mehmet Oğuztu. I know Turkey and the Kurdish regional governments were quick to point the blame for the base attack on the PKK. Can you talk to us about what position the PKK holds in Iraq and what type of threat does it pose to Turkey from there?
Well, PKK doesn't represent a threat only to Turkey. It also represents a serious threat to Kurdish leadership in northern Iraq. And Barzani family and the current government in Erbil feels that PKK is acting against their interests because Turkey provides a lifeline to KRG. As Sammy mentioned, Turkey built the infrastructure there. Turkish SMEs are everywhere. And Turkey also provides the only outlet of Kurdish oil through its border to Ceyhan for shipment to the international markets. So Erbil has every interest to work closely with Turkey. The relationship has been somehow tempered because of the Kurdish independence referendum, which Turkey adamantly opposed, but they went ahead. But since then, I think things are changing again, and Nechirvan Barzani wants to come to Ankara. And so there is a difference between PKK and KRG. And also, I think the worry becomes more heightened on the PKK side because there is a threat for Turkey to attack east of Euphrates in Syria. And then KRG on this side, PKK and PYD might be somehow squeezed. Therefore, this recent incident in the Turkish base, protest or whatever you call it, is a direct reflection of this worry on the PKK side, trying to highlight that Turkish military presence in the region is a threat. I think Nechirvan Barzani made it very clear. He said, we don't want PKK and Turkish bases in Turkey, but Turkish bases are protecting us. They haven't done anything against us. So it is the PKK instigating and provoking this.
I want to get back to Sammy.
Yes.
Sorry for cutting you off, but the KRG and Iraq's federal government actually took different positions regarding this attack. Can you explain the reasons behind the differences?
Masoud Barzani is caught in a catch-22. He wants to keep good relations with Ankara, but he doesn't want to be seen as complicit in the killing of Kurds. The reason why this is how the way it's seen is because despite the fact that there is this acceptance that Turkey's domestic security is genuinely under threat, Turkey has struggled to deliver a message that shows some sort of empathy towards the idea that the Kurdish might have some sympathies towards their brothers. They may see them as bad eggs in the family, they may see them as terrorists and the like, but at the end these are still Kurds. Masoud Barzani doesn't want to be seen as complicit in the killing of Kurds. He wants to be seen complicit in attacking a terrorist group. He doesn't want to be seen complicit in bringing a foreign force to come into their land to kill Kurdish people, but he also doesn't want to be seen as complicit in backing a terrorist group. Masoud Barzani is struggling to toe this very fine line. How do I keep a good relation with Ankara and accept that it has a domestic threat, an international threat to its security via the PKK? And how do I keep these Kurds who are genuinely upset by the messaging that is coming out from Ankara? I emphasize the messaging here because not the act, because Turkey has done much in terms of helping in improving the situation of the Kurds. The messaging of we will bury you in the ground and that's hard for them to receive. This is why I think out of the three forces in Iraq, Turkey, US and Iran, Turkey has the poorest PR and that's why it's paying the heaviest price. You think about this law now that is being put in the Iraqi parliament to turf out foreign forces. Turkey is nowhere near involved as the way the Iranians are or the US are. Turkey doesn't demand that a certain member of parliament becomes interior minister the way Iran does, in the way that it's pushing Falah al-Fayyad. Turkey doesn't insist like the US does, where Pompeo comes to Adel Abdel Mahdi, the prime minister, and says to him, you have to remove the weapons from the militias. Turkey takes a step out. But because of this poor messaging that comes out, Turkey is the one that is put up in the spotlight as the force that needs to be pushed out of Iraq. And this is an issue that could genuinely become very serious for Turkey if it doesn't look into it.
Okay, Turkey definitely needs a better PR campaign. Mehmet, Turkey has actually has several bases in Iraq, some dating back to the 90s. Can you talk to us about what role they play in helping Turkey's security?
Well, Turkey has altogether 11 bases in northern Iraq, dating back to late 90s and early 2000. And all of them have been either intelligence gathering operations or sometimes military training for Peshmergas as well. And so far they have, I think, fulfilled their missions quite peacefully. And the main reason why Turkey has these bases in Iraq is nothing to do with territorial integrity, sovereignty of Iraq. Simply because Iraqi army or Peshmerga are not able to control PKK attacks originating from this territory towards Turkey. We have a very long border, starting from the Iranian border to the Syrian border, then all the way, 950-kilometer long border. So we have great difficulty in protecting this border, although there is electronic surveillance, walls built now. And so the intention is to preempt PKK attacks on the Iraqi and now also on the Syrian territory. So it has served the purposes and it has received full cooperation from KRG in many regards. Also, Baghdad is making a lot of noises, but in reality, behind the closed doors, I think there is a very good cooperation between the Turkish and Iraqi military and political leaders. So for us, I think the key issue is border security, nothing else. Because if you look also, I will perhaps broaden the subject a little bit in here, Turkey has military bases in so many countries outside Turkey. We have in Qatar 3,000 soldiers, in Sudan, in also Somalia. We have in Bosnia for NATO forces or United Nations peacekeeping operations. So Turkish military is the 8th largest in the world. So it's projecting its power for peaceful reasons. But immediate region of Turkey, which is Iraq, where there is a very strong and imminent threat. And this threat has been seriously attacked and reduced. And this is the reason why the PKK and its allies are drumming up more and more against Turkish bases, because it's an easy target, as you say.
All right, another complicated relationship. Sammy Hamdi and Mehmet Oğuzcu, thank you both for coming in today.
Thank you.
That's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Rachel Rubel. If you have any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.